Okay then guys, there we are, there's the video. Remember what we've been looking at this week. Morning one, what was it? Transform to play. There we are. Morning one, transform to play. Morning two, prepare your minds. And yesterday, love one another. Today, we're looking at be prepared to speak. So as we start, 30 seconds, the person next to you, what do you find the hardest part about trying to tell your friends about Jesus, about living for him in your sports team? What's the hardest part? Let's go. 30 seconds. Okay, hold it there. Hold it there. It's good conversations, no doubt. Yamika, I'm going to ask you, what do you find most difficult about trying to live for Christ in your sports team?
So I found it this year particularly. I think once you say you're a Christian, I think that's fine. But then for me, I found it hard then just go further and speak about what it really means to me and what it means on a daily basis to be a Christian and follow Jesus. Yeah,
great. It's tough, isn't it? I'm sure we all find similar battles. I wonder if that was the content of a lot of your conversations. Okay, we're trying to live for Christ in our teams, but what does it mean to try and speak of him? What can we try and say? So many reasons why we find it difficult. Maybe we're worried that we don't know the words to say. We don't know exactly how to explain things. We're worried that, actually, do I really understand it myself? Maybe you're worried about what others will think of you, what their reactions will be. And as I was thinking about this, I thought about last week, the story came onto the news. Warren Gatland, Lions team manager, had picked his team for the final deciding test between the British and Irish Lions rugby team and the Australian side. And you'll have seen it, I'm sure you will. He made a big call. He left out Brian O'Driscoll, player of 4 tours, renowned leader, expected to be captain in the 4th test, and he left him out. And you know, I'm sure as he did it, he was convinced of what he knew, but no doubt he knew there'd be a reaction. He knew that O'Driscoll would be gutted not to play in his final Lions test. He'd have known that the media would have slammed him. He'd have known all about the uproar that was going to come. But you know what? He was convinced that what he'd done and what he decided was right. He was convinced of what he knew about what he'd seen of the players on the training pitch. And so as he made that decision, he'd have known what was going to come to him, but he still went for it. And you know what? It paid off, didn't it? A big win. And as we think about the topic today, as we think about how we can be prepared to speak, it's similar for us. Look, sometimes we're scared to speak of Christ because we know we're going to get battered. We know our mates will say things that we just don't like. We know they might react badly to us. But as we look at how we've been convinced of this hope, transformed by Christ this week, if you're a Christian, then we can think about how we can be prepared to speak for him. So Yamika's going to read the 2 verses for us today. They'll be up on the screen. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 15 and 16. Here you go, Yamika.
But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give that reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against you, against your good behavior in Christ, may be ashamed of their slander.
Great, thanks, Yamika. We see where it starts. First line, have a look at the screen. But in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. Now, that word revere, not a very commonly used word. I actually looked it up just to make sure I knew what it meant. And it's to have a real deep respect for somebody to be right up there. And here, Peter's asking us, he's saying to the Christians, scattered exiles in what is now Turkey, he was saying to them, in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. Hold him up as number one in your lives. Let him be the most important thing. Like we've looked at in the evenings. Will he be king of your life in every area? And here he says, hold him up. Put him as number one in your hearts. And as a heart attitude, as we've looked at already this week, that heart attitude will affect the way you live. It will do. As people transformed by Christ, as you revere Christ as Lord, hold him up in your hearts, it will affect the way that you live. And you will be distinctive for him if you hold him as number one.
So you're saying by having this, revering Christ in our hearts, how should this help us live? How can we actually say something about him to our teammates?
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? And we see as we move on, the next part of the verse, Peter says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. Now, as we think about speaking about Christ, we know the barriers. We know that it's hard because quite often we're worried about what we're going to say. I don't know if you've ever had it when someone's asked you a question, you just go, I just don't know what to say. I just don't know what the answer is. Or maybe you think you do, but you're worried that you might get it wrong. And so it leads to us not even wanting to speak of Christ at all because we're concerned that we will not get it right, that what we say will not be good enough. But look what he's asking us to do here. Look what Peter writes to the Christians. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. He's not saying, okay, always be prepared to know the answer to every single question. Always be prepared when somebody asks you about something that's really tough. Always be prepared to give the full explanation. He's saying, give a reason for the hope that you have. Why do you trust in Christ? Why have you been transformed? Be ready to give a reason for the hope that you have. Oh, it sounds so much simpler than I often think about it when I'm thinking about how I speak of Christ to my teammates. People ask me, why do you believe what you believe? And I can tell them. Above all, but let's be genuine. I find this really difficult. You know, when someone asks me why I believe what I believe, I think, right, I've got to give the perfect answer. I've got to explain to them everything about the historical accuracy of the Bible. I've got to think about how everything fits together in my head. Which Peter just says, always be prepared to give an answer. Tell them why you believe what you believe. Be genuine. Don't worry about what they think, but just give an answer for the hope that you have. If you have that hope, be genuine. Give them that answer. Don't worry that they think about what they may think about whether you've given it clearly, about whether you know the exact answer to the tough question, because you know what, tough questions do come, and we might not always know the answer. Just be prepared to give an answer for the hope that you have. And what does it look like to be prepared? Well, it's great to be able to think through why you do believe in Christ. Be ready to give that answer. Great to try and learn a gospel outline or to think through some of those answers to tough questions. Great to think about those things. But above all, just be prepared to give an answer for the hope that you have. Be ready to speak and be ready to just tell people what you think and why you think it.
So what does it look like then to answer?
Yeah, well, look on a couple of words here to the next bit. Sorry, back one. Oh, there we are. Always be ready to give an answer for the hope that you have, but do so with gentleness and respect. Now, Yamika, if you're on the rugby pitch and someone said, Yamika, he's such a gentle player, Yamika, he is. He's so gentle. What would your response be?
Probably wouldn't be too happy.
Wouldn't be too happy, right? And that's what a lot of us think, isn't it? When somebody says, be gentle, we think, that's so weak, isn't it? That's so weak. I don't want to be one who's being gentle. But actually, you know what? I think being gentle is such a strong response. It's such a strong thing to be. Because it's hard, isn't it? It's hard even to be gentle to your mates, to be gentle to them, to show them respect, to be nice to them when they wind you up. But what about those who, you know what, it's hard to get on with? The people in your team that get on your back, the people in your team that wind you up. How hard is it to be gentle to them? Yet how powerful can that be? I think of a girl I knew at university. She was a rugby player, really good rugby player, one of the best in her teams, a tough tackler. She was absolutely fearless on the pitch. And she was a Christian. She told her friends that she was. And some of them were really opposed. Some of their questions were about really tough things. They found it difficult to think through why she'd be a Christian. But she was ever so gentle with them. She really cared for them. She really cared for them when they asked her questions. Oh, she never pretended to know all the answers. She didn't. She'd openly say that. But she was so gentle. She showed them respect. And she gave them answers for the hope that she had. She just told them why she believed what she did. And it was so powerful. Those friends, they wanted to know more. They wanted to know more. So let's think, as we try and speak of Christ, being prepared to give those answers, what does it look like for us to be gentle and respectful to our teammates? What does it look like when you're on the bus and all your teams get on the back of one player? They're absolutely ripping into them, and the banter turns nasty. And there's something in you which says, I want to get involved. They'll think I'm the funny one. I want to get involved. Let me just throw in that one more comment that will really hit them, and then everyone will have a laugh. What does it look like in that situation to be gentle and to be respectful? What does it look like when one of your friends asks you about your faith? Maybe you give them the answer, the reason for the hope that you have, and they get really aggressive. They start arguing away, start being quite front-footed, being aggressive to you. And what's our natural reaction? We sort of rise to it ourselves, don't we? We get into a bit of an argument. What does it look like in those situations to be really gentle and to revere Christ in our hearts, to be prepared to give an answer for the hope that we have, but to be gentle as we do it?
So what can we expect then as you try and live and speak of this living hope that we have inside us?
Yeah, well, if we flick on to the next part of the verse. Do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behaviour in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. Peter's clear here, isn't he? You know what? We will suffer. There will be people who will speak maliciously against your good behaviour in Christ. There will be people in the change room who will say things behind your back, maybe to your face. There will be people who will slander you. He's telling us to be ready for that. He's telling us to be prepared. Yet, if we revere Christ as Lord, if we're prepared to give an answer for the hope that we have, if we do it with gentleness and respect, holding Christ up, look what Peter says. Keep a clear conscience. Do things genuinely. Do things because you care about the people in your team. Keeping a clear conscience so that those who speak maliciously against your good behaviour in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. Those people will realise that there's something more to good behaviour than just being a bit odd. They'll realise there's more to you trying to live for Christ than just being a bit random in your team and doing things they don't agree with. They will speak maliciously, but keep a clear conscience, continue to speak of Christ so that they may be ashamed of their slander, so they might realise who he is, so they might realise that Jesus is worth living for. Such an encouragement, isn't it? Such an encouragement as we see those times where we do find it difficult. Keep speaking of Christ. Revere Christ as Lord in your hearts. Be prepared to give an answer for the hope that you have. Do it with gentleness and respect. And people will be ashamed of their slander, will see Christ in you.